So hopefully you're here to join us for the Families Kept Apart webinar. We're really delighted to have you with us today. We are planning to use today's session to really explore more about overnight accommodation and how this can facilitate family integrated care practice on the neonatal unit. So just to introduce myself, I'm Chelsea Letts. I work at Bliss. I'm the Healthcare Engagement Programme Lead, and we will make sure that everybody is introduced to you during kind of the session today, but it's been my pleasure to be asked to kind of properly start off today's session, just talking through a little bit about what we're going to be running through today and what we want to try and get out of today's session. So you can see that we have a jam-packed programme to run through today, which we're really looking forward to. We have a few of my lovely colleagues at Bliss going to be speaking a bit more about our Families Kept Apart campaign, just to explain a bit more about some of our learnings and findings over the past year. We're hoping to have some parent insight too through today's session, which hopefully will be really kind of insightful. It's always really useful to hear directly from families about their experiences. And then we're also really pleased to welcome a few guest speakers that will be speaking about some of their own work on their neonatal units, and also a representative from the Sick Children's Trust, which is a real pleasure to have them with us today. So what we really want to get out today is quite a lot, actually. We want to make sure that we are kind of really helping you as healthcare professionals to increase your knowledge and awareness of the opportunities around overnight accommodation, and increase your confidence in thinking about options and discussing those options with parents and carers while they have a baby in the neonatal unit. As part of that, and as I'll come on to in just a moment, we want to just really highlight the connection between thinking about accommodation and family integrated care, which we know so many of you are working towards delivering on your neonatal units at the moment, and how important this can be to kind of really making that a reality. And kind of integrated within that is the real importance of thinking about how we can support individual families. So individualising care for them as well as their babies, to really think about kind of maybe some of the inequities or inequalities that might be facing them, the barriers that they might face when it comes to being with their baby and really being partners in their baby's care. And what the role of accommodation has within that too. So lots to try and pack in today. So I just wanted to really kind of highlight, before handing over to my colleague Beth, a bit more about exactly why kind of we're working on this, and why kind of the accommodation has such a key part of supporting the delivery of family integrated care on the neonatal unit. Hopefully you will have seen this this diagram, this image before. We've taken it from the BAPM FICARE framework for practice, and it's the model of family integrated care for the UK. And you can see that the partnership with parents bit at the centre of this model is really kind of central to what we're trying to achieve, and all of those elements around it, including empowerment, environment, wellbeing, culture, all of that kind of needs to come together in order to really enable that partnership to become a reality. Today we're focusing on the environment section, and I've just pulled out a little bit from the framework itself about what it says about environment. And you can see, I think, so on the left-hand side of your screen is the snippet about kind of what neonatal units should be thinking about when it comes to environment and supporting FICARE delivery. And we have here, I think it's the third from the bottom, access to dedicated neonatal family accommodation for all those who need it. And then on the right-hand side, it's an extract from the thinking about the ODNs, the networks, and how they can be supporting the better environment for neonatal units to think about kind of delivery of FICARE. And that top one is the development of a network strategy, sorry, for the equitable provision of parental facilities, including accommodation. And we know that there's lots of challenge around this, and this is an ideal, but it's there, it's in the framework. It's a really important part of thinking about how we can support parents to be partners in their baby's care if they are unable to stay and they're told to go home for whatever reason. Then that becomes a real barrier and a real challenge. So really for us is a really important part of thinking about how we can support families carers, parents, to be that central part of their baby's care, and also to individualise care for them, to think about what they might need, whether it's the challenge of travel, the challenge of cost of travel, distance, whatever it might be. Actually, the being able to provide that opportunity for them to stay with their baby is hugely important. So enough from me. It's a bit of an introduction. I'm really pleased to hand over to my colleague Beth, who will introduce herself and talk a bit more about our campaign. Over to you, Beth.
Thanks, Chelsea. Yeah, hi, I'm Beth McGuinty. I manage the policy research and campaigns team at Bliss. I'm just going to talk to you a bit about some work that we did with parents a few years ago that I guess kind of kicked off the early thinking around this campaign. So in 2022, we did a big piece of work looking at parent experiences of barriers to involvement in care. Most of those were around kind of practical barriers. We had around 2,000 parents complete a survey that looked at lots and lots of different issues. So cost, as Chelsea just pointed out, is a massive one for parents. Childcare, we did some work around mental health and women who are inpatients while their baby is in neonatal care, and the barriers that puts in place between them being able to look after the baby on the unit. And one of the things that we asked on each of these issues, which were kind of developed with parents, a list of all the big barriers that they faced. We asked, did this stop you being involved in your baby's care? Accommodation or not having accommodation at the unit or nearby the unit was the biggest thing that parents said affected their ability to be involved in their baby's care. So 87% of them said that. 75% of them said they didn't have access to accommodation when the baby was critically ill, which is quite key in terms of, I guess, supporting parents at their very worst moments. But also one of the things that this work really highlighted to us was not just for those parents where their baby's critically ill or where they've got a long journey in to the neonatal unit, but that actually this was really important to parents who live 10 minutes down the road from their local hospital, who didn't have to travel in but had to leave overnight. And so 40% of the parents that said they didn't have access to accommodation said that was because they didn't meet the unit's criteria for it because they lived too close to the hospital. And actually in our findings, the parents living closer to the hospital were just as likely to say they're not having somewhere to stay stops them being involved in their baby's care as those that lived kind of 30 minutes, an hour, 2 hours away from their hospital. So, yeah, and then I'm just going to share with you some quotes from some parents. If you could go to the next slide, please, Chelsea. So hopefully these highlight some of the issues that we kind of found in this piece of work. So the first one says, I had to leave my baby daily to go home, even though there were empty rooms because I lived close. It was only when I complained about my son's care that I was allowed to stay. And that's from Tasha, a mum who has been campaigning on this issue with us, and whose son is called Teddy. I think the thing highlighted there is that there were empty rooms on the unit and she knew that there were, but those were reserved to parents that lived further away and there just wasn't anyone using them at the time. One of the things that I think we've talked a lot with parents about is that and actually healthcare professionals as well, is that it's awkward to say to someone, oh, you might be able to stay tonight but not tomorrow night. And I think that's probably something that we're going to explore a bit more, being able to talk openly about that, because actually parents say even getting one night, if there happened to be an empty room, would have been wonderful. This next one is really about the care that the survey respondent was able to provide to her baby. So she says, as a parent wanting to breastfeed, I needed to be there, and with no overnight accommodation, breastfeeding became impossible. That's something that we hear from a lot of moms who want to breastfeed, that not being there overnight is a real problem. The next one says, it was very hard to walk away while she was critically ill at times, but because there was nowhere to stay, we had no choice but to go home while she was on the intensive care ward, which we know is the reality for so many parents. And this one, I think, really highlights to me, and we use this in a lot of places because to me it's really the epitome of what parents were telling us about having to leave the baby overnight, that I'm not sure we all always recognise, is that it was torture and the most heartbreaking time leaving our baby each night. We were offered one night of accommodation in hospital. This was only a single bed. My husband had to sleep in a chair. So actually that kind of inclusive access to being able to stay overnight, I think, is really important for parents, that the partner is also able to be there. But that bit of it was torture and it was the most heartbreaking time is what we hear from parents a lot, is that moment that they have to leave the hospital at night is really, really hard. And then this last quote hopefully highlights a bit of what having good accommodation can bring. And actually, I think we're going to hear from a lot of places about some of the really great provision that is out there. So being in the flat meant I could spend as much time as I possibly could with my baby, finding every small way possible to bond with her and be her mum. So that's really nice. Anyway, I think I'm going to pass over to my colleague Maya now.
Thank you, Beth.
So hi, I'm Maya Parkin. I'm the Policy and Campaigns Officer at Bliss. And as Beth outlined earlier, Bliss, have been long aware that the lack of overnight accommodation is a significant and very prevalent barrier to accessing neonatal care. And this does need to change. Before we started this campaign, there wasn't really enough information available publicly to get a clear picture of what accommodation and its associated facilities look like on neonatal units. And this is something that we really needed to, have to show policymakers that the infrastructure, as you all know, really isn't aligned with what best practice is, with like what Chelsea was saying about FICARE at the start of the webinar today. So in order to get this better picture, we worked with healthcare professionals to develop a survey, and this was distributed to units, and we collected data from 85% of units across England, Scotland, and Wales. And so without getting into too much of the nitty-gritty from the briefing, I will just share a few key highlights. So the most prominent highlight that really stands out is that for every 10 babies that need to stay overnight, there's only one parent bedroom on the unit. And there are other accommodation available nearby, whether this is on another ward like the maternity ward or in transitional care, or sometimes provided by a charity, as we'll hear more about later. And next slide, please, Chelsea. So the healthcare professionals shared that the biggest barriers to providing parents somewhere to stay overnight are the lack of capital investment and physical space on the unit and trust estate for beds, which I'm sure that you're all very aware of. And then the second was that parents are unable to stay for any length of time due to personal reasons, even if they want to, they have other children at home. It's just not feasible, really. Next slide, please. And the top priorities for spending were, as you can see here, so things like dedicated transitional care facilities, reviewing current accommodation to see if there's a more creative way that the space can be used, or maybe borrowing space from or taking space from another part of the hospital which isn't being used, and then build accommodation outside the units for families with longer stays or who live far away. And Claire will talk a little bit about how they've been doing this in Wales later on in the webinar. And yeah, finally, financial support for families for things like meals and transport costs. To stop me just doing all the talking, I was wondering if you could all take a minute in the chat to share one change you would make to your unit to support more parents to stay overnight. I know that's a hard ask, but if there's like one thing you could do immediately to support more parents to stay overnight on the unit, what would that be? Giving every parent the opportunity to stay overnight near their baby is hugely important for facilitating family integrated care. And parents are supported to be with their baby for prolonged periods, report increased parental confidence, reduced stress, and reduced anxiety scores as well. And like the quotes that Beth highlighted earlier, many parents tell us that being able to comfort and feed their baby during the night is a crucial part of being meaningfully involved in their care. And another quick little interaction, please take a minute, and I'd like you to share in the chat one way in which overnight accommodation facilitates family integrated care on your unit. So thinking about what Chelsea said earlier about how accommodation can facilitate family integrated care, it'd be great if you could just share an example of how this happens on your unit. Now I will hand over to Tan, who is an amazing parent campaigner who's helped us with other areas of work aside from accommodation in focus groups, and also Tan was part of our parent co-creation group for this Families Kept Apart campaign.
Hello, I'm Tan Melia. My children were born to my wife, so I'm a non-birth mother. They were born in February 2021, so in the midst of our second lockdown, which is quite important to my story. So my wife had a bleed at 27 weeks at home, and she was blue lighted to our local hospital, which was the John Radcliffe in Oxford, which is a level 3. So we were really lucky that we were straight into a level 3. I wasn't allowed to go into that ambulance with her. I had to go in a separate one that happened to just be going back to base. So that was kind of the start of us having a bit of isolation from each other and not being able to stay together. For the next 5 days, she was in and out of the delivery suite, and when I was only allowed to be with her when she was in the delivery suite. Anytime she was on the ward, I was having to stay away, and that was due to COVID, but that was really tricky for us, wanting to support one another and not being able to be there for one another. A lot of the time I was spending in a travel lodge 12 minutes away from the hospital, and when I could, sitting in the car park of the hospital for hours on end, wrapped up in as many blankets as I could possibly get. Around the birth, I was allowed in to the births of both my children, Harry and Eloise, and I was able to be there, which was great. The kids were then taken to ICU, and my wife was taken back to the ward, and I was back in my travel lodge. 2 days in, I managed to get accommodation in the Ronald McDonald, which was in the car park of the hospital, which was fantastic. It was such a godsend for us. We lived half an hour away from the hospital, so if I had have stayed at home, I would have missed the birth of my children. Because I'd stayed in the travel lodge, I'd made it, but obviously the travel lodge was quite expensive, and I wouldn't be able to keep that up for a long time. So Ronald McDonald really did save us a lot of money, time, hassle. It just gave us that freedom, which was really, we were so grateful for. There was part of that though, that because we were given that, it kind of took away from the option of staying on ward. We didn't know it was an option, and I think we were just so grateful to have Ronald McDonald and be that much closer, that the thought of having something on ward just didn't really cross our mind at that point. So a week in, my wife got discharged from the maternity levels, and she moved in with me to Ronald McDonald, which you can see in the bottom middle photo there. That was her first night with me in Ronald McDonald. There was then a bit of a pressure to help look after her, as well as making as much time with the children as possible. With the children, they were in incubators at this point, so they had been separated from one another, which was quite tricky for us to imagine, because they'd had all this time together, all this time in Lynn's womb, my wife Lynn's, sorry, in her womb. They'd have 6 months together in there, and then all of a sudden they were isolated from one another as well. So that was quite hard for us to think about. But leaving your child, especially a newborn, is just such a weird feeling. Like, it just doesn't feel right to do that. But it's so normalized in NICU because it's a necessity. I think it's really important to acknowledge that difficulty that there is there. There was also a trickiness in this. Ronald McDonald was in the car park. It was about a 5-minute walk from door to door, which was amazing. As I say, that's a lot less than if we would have been staying at home. But sometimes I had to go and find a wheelchair for Lindsay over at the main hospital, bring it back, go and get Lynn's, and then take her over. If we would have had on-ward accommodation, that would have been negated, and I mean that would have taken a massive amount of stress off from both of us. Yeah, there's also something around when Lynn's was discharged. I think it was really tricky for her to leave the hospital without her children. It feels like if that's what happens, you've given birth to a child and then you leave the hospital without a child in your arms, or children in our case, it feels like the worst has happened. And obviously it hadn't for us, but that mental block is quite tricky to overcome. We obviously realised that the healthcare professionals that we had left the children with, that was the best care that they could have. We couldn't give them better care at that point. We really did understand that. And there's a big push for kangaroo care and breastfeeding. And it almost feels counterintuitive to be like, okay, we want you to do these, but then at the same time, you're not with your children all the time, so we couldn't have both. So there was that as well. We were also really aware of the impact on the children. Like I said, they'd had all this time together, and we were worried about what were they feeling? What did they feel? Did they feel abandoned? What if they needed something, we weren't there for them? That was quite tricky. Again, if we had on-ward accommodation, could we have been there more for them? But then had we not had Ronald McDonald, we would have been there even less for them. So it was kind of a middle ground, I guess. As you can see from the photos that are on the screen, we had these recliner chairs that were next to the cots and incubators. In the bottom left, you can see, though, that those 2 incubators there, my children in there, and we only had 1 chair. I think we were very much seen as one unit, me and Lynn's. Even though we had the 2 children, there was only 1 unit. So we only needed 1 chair. If there wasn't enough available, it would be ours would be the one that taken. Sometimes we did have 2 chairs, and we were very grateful for the recliner chairs. They were really, really good and generally very comfortable, although sometimes they were a little bit broken. But as we all know, it's the systems, isn't it? It's the systems and the processes that are failing at the moment. So then that brings me on to the homeward bound rooms, which is the bottom right photo. Now, this photo isn't actually my photo. It's another twin mummy who allowed me to use this photo, which is why the children are blurred out. But this room, it was very clinical. This is the room that we were using just as we were getting ready to go home. It was very bare and very clinical, and as you can see, it was also quite cramped, but we were grateful that we could finally have a night with the children. Unfortunately, Lynn's found it too clinical, and it reminded her of the rooms before the birth. So she actually felt so triggered that she couldn't stay in those rooms. She just couldn't bring herself to do it. So she actually stayed over at Ronald McDonald, and I stayed in there on my own. However, we brought this up with the psychology team, which who are amazing. Also, we use those that psychology team a lot, and they helped us get the top right, which is Lynn's and my son Harry. This is a little self-contained flat that they had as well, and this was much more homely. Carpet and curtains. It felt like a little home, and it had a little kitchenette, and it really made the absolute difference to be able to have that stepping stone between a ward that we couldn't properly stay on and home. It really did help so much. We felt like we could bond. I mean, look how happy they both look there. It's just lovely to see. And the final thing that I've got written down here was that I felt like not being able to stay on the unit, we missed so many firsts, and I felt, such as the first nappy. I know it sounds like a really silly thing to be upset about. I didn't see my son's first poo, but I didn't, and it was really strange not to be involved in those firsts, and it would have been amazing to have had those experiences. Having said that, I always say to parents that are potentially facing NICU that it's not a place to fear, that it's a place that I learned how to become a mum better than I could have ever imagined, and I wouldn't change our story. I think that's all from me.
Thank you so much, Tan, for highlighting. I mean, you're amazing, but thank you so much for highlighting the importance of parents being able to stay in the type of accommodation that suits their needs as well. I think that really shone through from your story, and also for sharing your perspective as as a non-birthing mum as well. It's quite unrepresented in our work. So pleased that you were part of the campaign, and thank you so much for everything that you do.
You're welcome.
Using Instagram, I asked parents to tell us what they wish they'd known about accommodation, and this was some digital involvement that we did recently. And I just have a few of the themes up on the slide. So the most common themes from parents that responded were, I might not be staying on the same ward as my baby after giving birth, what my accommodation options were and how their use was prioritized, that dads and non-birthing parents can stay as well, and also which facilities we could use during the day on the unit. For example, showers or breastfeeding rooms or prayer rooms, etc. And parents, we often hear from parents that they would have welcomed the opportunity to speak with healthcare professionals early in their neonatal journey about their specific circumstances and needs. Now, I'm not an expert on how to navigate these conversations with parents about their accommodation options on the unit. But luckily, we have currently 47 or 46 who are probably who are definitely more experts than I am. So if you feel like you can, I'd appreciate if you could put up your hand, and I will unmute your microphone. And I'd love if someone could share any advice about how you or your unit informs parents on one of these themes. So it could be talking about anything that's on the slide. Wonderful, Catherine. And also, if you'd like to introduce yourself first, then feel free. Should be able to unmute.
Hi, my name's Kate. I'm a family care sister on a level 3 NICU at the Norfolk and Norwich Hospital. We have a family care team, which I lead, which we're very lucky to have, which are separate to the nursing team. We're all nurses, but we are separate, and we focus on FI care. So we admit every family, we see every family within 24 hours of admission to the unit. And this is one of the main conversations we have with families. So we have 4 on-unit bedrooms and 6 off-unit bedrooms, like a self-contained, like uni accommodation type thing. And we have to tell our parents we're a 42-bedded unit. We have 4 bedrooms on the unit. You know, we have to tell them that, you know, we will put you where we can and what suits your needs. A lot of our parents have had sections obviously and can't walk over to the other accommodation, but we always just tell them we'll look at their individual need and see where they need to be. We've turned our meeting rooms into bedrooms on the unit before. We've put up beds and things like that. So, you know, we tend to find the families that have to be with us, need to be with us with the really sick babies, can be with us, but it's those everyday parents that come every day, that do live closer. We do have to have those conversations to say we can't accommodate that, which is really sad. But my team tends to have that conversation, so we have a dedicated team for those conversations.
My name's Sinead. I'm the new neonatal infant feeding lead at the Rosie in Cambridge. We are a little bit more lucky than Kate here, so we have 8 rooms in Chestnut House, which is downstairs from the NICU, and they're all ensuite rooms. But again, we have 40 cots, so it's never enough. Sorry, excuse me. And then we also have Ellsworth House, which are some shared flats. So they're single rooms, and then they have, sorry, excuse me. They share kind of provisions, kitchens and bathrooms and everything. One of the things that is kind of coming over the last couple of years is mums aren't allowed to stay in any of our accommodation on their own for 5 days after they've delivered, which means if they have other children and their partner has to go home, they aren't able to stay, or if they don't have people who can stay with them. It's a really difficult kind of middle ground where we really need them to stay and they want to stay, but they can't. So that's very difficult.
Yes, it is certainly really challenging, but this is something that I'm hoping we can, get to later on in the webinar as well, and keep sharing creative ways of using space and, helping parents and supporting them to stay on the unit and feel like they're supported to do so. So moving on to, I'm going to introduce Kelly Stewart from Sick Children's Trust, who is joining us today to talk about their accommodation. So Kelly, when you're ready, over to you.
Great. Thanks very much, Maya, and thanks for having me. So my name's Kelly. I'm the Director of Communications and Marketing at the Sick Children's Trust, but my role is much broader than comms and marketing. I also work with our operations teams to identify new opportunities for us to help hospitals with new accommodation and work with those teams. So I'm going to give you a bit of information about the Sick Children's Trust. I'm just going to share my screen with you. The Sick Children's Trust was founded over 40 years ago, and since then we've helped over 80,000 families by providing them with somewhere to stay. Our homes are all over the country, as you can see. We have 10 homes from home, but our first one was bought by 2 paediatricians who were working at Great Ormond Street Hospital, and they saw that lots of families were sleeping on the floor, sleeping in chairs, and they really saw this as an injustice to the families, because obviously they couldn't be involved in their child or their baby's care. So they started the charity almost 42 years ago, and Rainbow House was opened in 1984. So yeah, since then we've either built or renovated some old Victorian properties around the country, and as I say, we've helped around about over 80,000 families since then. So our homes are very homely. You can see here some stats about families that we actually helped last year. So we gather statistics from lots of different places. We ask families for feedback, and I'm going to share some of that with you in a minute as well. But this just gives you a little bit of an insight into the numbers of families we help. So we aim to help about 3,500 families a year in our 10 homes. We can provide 148 families with accommodation each night. And average travel time for our families is 89 minutes. And I'm sure you hear similar things from all of the families that you help as well in terms of travelling distance. So we prioritise families on quite a range of different metrics, but one of them is travel time. So obviously the further away they live, then we'll obviously try and provide them with accommodation. But we work really closely with the hospitals that we support around the country. So here's some little pictures of some of our homes. You can see that they're quite homely, and I think that's something we would say is our USP. They've got kitchens, they've got really nice living rooms where families can sit down and relax. The kitchens, they can cook a meal, they have their own cupboards, they have their own fridge space, and obviously, really importantly, we have the bedrooms where they can sleep and get a good night's rest. We know how important it is for families to get rest, so that they can be there for their baby or their sick child. Any family members can stay, including siblings. Most of our houses have playrooms where the siblings can play and entertain themselves as well. So yeah, we really do try and provide that sort of homely feel for families. And most of our homes are within 5-minute walking distance to the hospitals. I think, as you just heard from Sinead, one of our homes in Cambridge at the Rosie is Chestnut House, and it's actually in the hospital. So literally families can just get in the lift and go to the unit, which is obviously amazing for them. I just wanted to share this with you. We looked into all of the families who stay with us and what conditions their children have or where the children are staying. And you can see there 335 families were helped whose babies were in neonatal care or SCABU last year. And that's of our sort of 3,500 families a year. So it's quite a significant proportion of families that we help be near their baby who is in NICU. This is a quote from a mum, and I thought it was quite powerful and would probably resonate with you a bit as well. You know, we know that parents being near their baby helps with the care of their baby, and as this mum has said, she learnt to give medication and take part in his personal care. We ask families for feedback before they leave the home, and actually we communicate with them after they've left to try and get feedback from them as well about the difference that it's made to be able to stay in one of our homes. And last year, of all the families who gave feedback, 87% said they were involved in the personal care of their baby. 67% said that they were able to learn feeding techniques. 100% of families who stayed with us said that staying in one of our homes from home helped them to cope, and also 100% said it was better for their child's well-being and their child's recovery, and also 100% of those families who filled in the feedback survey said that it helped their own mental well-being. So we know how important that is for parents and family members to feel well so that they can provide the best care to their baby as well. So our vision is that what we would love is that every family with a seriously ill child in hospital can stay together near their child's bedside, and we know that reality is quite far away for us. We wish that was the case and we weren't a charity and we could walk away, but that's not the case. So we're working on a 5-year strategy at the moment, and 2 of the focuses of our 5-year strategy, one of them is looking at children's mental health services and if there's anything we can do to provide accommodation for families so they can be near their child when their child's having treatment. But the other big area for us is neonatal care. So we are going to be working with Bradford Royal Infirmary. We're building a 5-bedroom house there, which will be really closely linked to the neonatal unit. It'll literally be just outside of the neonatal unit. So they'll have an extra five bedrooms a night where families can stay and be really near to their baby. We're working really closely with the hospital's charity there to fundraise for this, and we've got an amazing commitment from the trust, so we're working really, really closely with them. But what this will provide that we haven't done before, outside of providing the accommodation, the families who are on the unit at the time will be able to use the facilities in the home. So they'll be able to come in and wash their clothes or have a shower or make a meal, and while that's not accommodation, we know those small things can make a big difference too. You know, we know that it will allow them to be closer to their baby while their baby's in hospital, and as you'll all know, it's really important for, you know, for the baby's care. So this is just one really exciting project that we're working on at the moment. And you know, we are very aware that probably most people on this webinar need more accommodation for families to stay in, and as a charity, if there's anything we can do, then obviously that's, you know, that's our role, that's our vision, and we'll be looking for other opportunities. So if anybody does think that their hospital might be in a position to take forward some accommodation and maybe work with us on that, then we would be very open to any conversations. I wanted to leave you on these slides, which are a family whose baby was born very prematurely, and what we hope is that every family can go home and have a really positive outcome, like this little guy. But I just wanted to read a quote from the mum about their experience of staying in one of our homes, because I think it sums that up really well. And she said, "We spent a total of 21 days being supported by the Sick Children's Trust with nothing asked for in return. They kept us together throughout Alfie's first Christmas and will be eternally grateful for that. Their Homes from Home provides so much more than just a bed. It's a community of parents who all understand what each other's going through, a bond like no other. It's a sanctuary away from the ward where you can cook yourself a meal, much."
Thank you so much, Kelly, for sharing the amazing work that Sick Children's Trust do. And yes, lots of food for thought as well. Thank you. So now I am going to hand over to Emily Hills and Claire Kane, who will talk about the accommodation available at the Barnet neonatal unit. So over to you two.
Thank you so much, and thank you for having us today. We're just going to share the screen. We work at Starlight Neonatal Unit at Barnet Hospital, which is under the Royal Free Healthcare NHS Trust. And we just wanted to do, I mean, you're all very aware of this, but just to really reiterate why the neonatal unit, why the environment matters so much. And they say that you can be the best neurosurgeon in the world. No one's going to have the same impact on brain development as the person who works in the neonatal unit. So for babies, it is a crucial period of brain growth and development. And for families, this is a really defining moment for them. It's where you're forming your family for the very first time. And sometimes we forget about the staff as well, but it turns out they really matter as well, because it's who we are and it really defines us. And we also have to really consider how it's possible to work within this environment. So I'll take over. So I'm Claire Kane, I'm one of the neonatal consultants at Barnet Hospital. So we know that individualised care rooms provide the optimal environment for most babies. It will give you the perfect individualized sensory environment. It will give you the best infection control. There's plenty of evidence to support that, but because it's well recognised that this barrier that you can then have between each baby and each family obviously is going to improve infection control. We all know that maximising skin-to-skin contact has huge benefits for the baby, and plenty of kangaroo care is shown to improve your neurodevelopmental outcome. So we did quite a lot of research to find out that individualised care rooms would be the best way forward, and not just for the babies, but also for the families. We know that individualised care rooms will provide privacy for the interaction with the baby, lots of privacy for parents interacting with each other, privacy for expressing and for breastfeeding, and privacy for those really important conversations that staff want to have with parents, and just for the day-to-day interaction that staff can provide to parents. And our rooms give parents a sense of control over the care that their baby is getting, and enable the family to really feel like they are belonging to the care that's provided on the neonatal unit.
So what we did on our unit all the way back in 2013, Chase Farm Hospital was closing down, and we were required to take 10 of their beds onto our unit. And initially, we were just going to have a massive open bay and sort of say good luck to everybody. And then we went, wait 1 minute, we would like to be like Karolinska in Sweden, and we want to provide couplet care. So we presented that to the hospital, and the hospital said, okay, you can do that, but you can do that in this corridor. And that didn't stop us. So we said, okay, we're going to do it. And we really, really passionately believe that you need to keep babies and families together. And the evidence says if you separate a baby from their parents, you flood both nervous systems with cortisol. And so it's probably the single biggest mistake we've ever made in neonatal care. We also recognise that the United Nations Conventions on the Rights of the Child says a child must not be separated from their parents. And we always respect that in paediatrics, but it's often massively overlooked in neonatal care, which is why we said, right, we're doing it, and we're going to have individualised care rooms.
So with that knowledge in mind, we set about creating 10 rooms for our families. We have 30 cots in total. So now a third of our cots are keeping our families and babies together. And often it can be more than 10 babies, because we will take twins into those rooms as well. You can see from the picture, this is the kind of room that we have. We can take incubators in there. They're all wired up for full monitoring for each baby, and there's central monitoring. Plus the staff carry pagers, so if any monitor goes off, a pager will also alarm. The rooms have a lot of privacy, but they also have glass so that we can continue to see in, as long as there isn't something going on where the parents have closed down the blinds. We want mothers to be discharged medically before, as inpatients, before they're in the room, so that they are very safe. But we'll take babies really as soon as they have a good degree of stability. So ideally above 30 weeks and above a kilo. But we'll still take babies who need CPAP, high and low flow nasal cannula oxygen, central lines, because we can provide the same nursing ratios in those rooms as we can on the rest of the neonatal unit. And we'll have families who, for various reasons, will choose just to spend 1 or 2 nights there, or families where the mum may never really leave the hospital from the time that she's had a baby, and stay in for maybe up to 10 weeks. So we can really try and tailor the experience to the family. So we thought there was no better way to try and describe this experience than to show you a video of one of our parents.
This is Danny Lee, and we came to the Starlight neonatal unit when she was 28 weeks and 1 day gestation. At first, I was a little bit nervous because we had been round on the ward with all of the amazing nurses and consultants, and I was a bit nervous. I thought that we might not have been ready, but everyone gave us the confidence and said we were. So we came round and it was the best thing we did. So we brought, first of all, my nan brought me a bed sheet, a duvet cover and pillow to make it nice and comfortable and feel a bit homely. We had blankets from home that smelt of home. Yeah, okay. I brought my own cup to have a nice cup of tea every morning, just to make it a little bit, feel like home, smells from home. And then we brought Daddy every day to come visit. 100%. It was the nicest thing, and to think that it's available to parents to spend time with your baby before you go home just gives you that confidence, and you've got everybody out there that gives you such support. They make you feel like any time you question, can I do this? Am I doing it right? Everybody's right behind you. They get you involved. You get a chance to do absolutely everything. So when it comes to this day, discharge day, you're ready and you're confident to go out of here knowing that she was in great hands and now she's in your hands. So I'm Stacey.
And then just to finish off, we just thought we'd just highlight some of the other initiatives that we really try to do to support the families when they're on here, because it's long. And so we have once a week we have a mum and dad's club, and that is where you can either come and make something for your child, or just have a tea, or learn about massage or breastfeeding. So we're super flexible. We do supper club once a month, where I always want to talk about development, but basically it's sharing food and meeting each other. We do sibling groups in the half term, so the siblings, just have a session for themselves, and we either take photos of the babies and make frames, or we have a more sort of like just a chat. And then just to support everybody for when they go home, so sort of that transition from primary secondary care isn't so daunting. So we have Little Stars, which is a 5-week baby massage infant developmental group. We do introduction to solids 4 times a year. We have the Superstars Meetup, which runs 4 times a year, where parents can come and feedback what went well and what they would like to improve. And then lastly, we have the summer party. And that's everything.
Thank you both so much, Emily and Claire, for sharing about Barnett's amazing individualized care room. Share that lovely video of a parent. So thank you both so much. And moving on, I like to introduce Claire Payne. And Claire is a senior nurse at the Grange unit in Wales. Over to you, Claire.
Hi everyone, thanks for inviting me. I'm just going to share my screen. So as Maya said, I am presenting our accommodation and facilities from the Grange University Hospital. So we moved to the Grange Hospital in 2020 in the midst of COVID. We previously had 2 units, one at Neville Hall and one at the Royal Gwent Hospital. So both of those units joined to make the Grange Hospital. And whilst we would have loved the luxury of more time, COVID had other ideas, and so our planning was very much speeded up to allow us to move in before all the lockdowns and everything hit. So let me show you our photos. So this is a photo of the special care area. So we have 2 8-bedded, very large special care nurseries. There's space for 4 babies sort of on the inside of the nurseries. And then on the outside then, on the perimeter, there are 4 what we call pods, very similar to the previous presenters, rooms. You can see that the pods have sliding doors to allow parents the privacy, and hopefully you can see on the third photo there's a sofa bed that obviously turns into a bed. Probably not the most comfy, but at least it allows parents to be close to their babies, and a recliner chair so that if dad wanted to stay. So as I said, we moved from 2 units into this to the Grange, and the facilities for parents were so much better in at the Grange. So much more space. Hopefully these pictures will give you an idea of the space, and space was something that we didn't have in either of the other 2 units. So in terms of encouraging mums and dads to be present for long periods of the day, they just didn't feel that they could in the other units, whereas now we find that we have parents on the unit for really long periods, if not always staying with us, and it really does allow for the phi care. We really strongly believe in phi care at the Grange. We have lots of phi care training sessions. There's a teaching schedule just to encourage parents to do everything that they can, really, and our motto is that the nurses will only do what the nurses need to do, the nursing roles, and parents will do everything else. So one of the huge improvements that we had when we moved to the Grange was the parent kitchen. So this is just somewhere where parents can go and meet up, and I'm sure that we're all aware of the huge amount of support that parents give each other. They can ask each other questions, and it's lovely actually this room is kind of in the middle of a long corridor. Excuse me. And it's lovely to walk past and to just see this room busy. I purposely came in early, so this is very early in the morning, and you can still see that there's one mum in there, but this room is really well used, and it's just lovely to hear the parents talking to each other and gaining support from each other. We've got, so as well as the 8 pods on the unit, we also have 3 rooming in rooms that hopefully you can see on the photos. What I tried not to take off is opposite the bed there is a huge television. They weren't our choice, we didn't particularly want them, but when we moved in, there was these huge televisions in each of the rooms. I don't think parents ever switch them on, because if they're in the rooms, then they wanted to be focusing on their babies. But yeah, so each of the rooms have their own toilet, but unfortunately they weren't big enough to have their own shower. So there is a shared shower, and that is probably the downside of our unit, because with the 8 pods and the 3 double bedrooms, we only have the 1 shower, but we are in the process of planning being thought to turn one of our toilets, one of our many toilets on the unit, into like a type of wet room that will allow for disabled access. So that will be a real big step forward, and we are very much hopeful that we will get that. So with those three bedrooms and the 8 pods, we kind of underestimated, I think, how popular the rooms would be, and for all the reasons that we've heard about this morning. And so we looked into expanding our parent accommodation, and we were very fortunate to be allowed access to 2 houses. So the photo that you can see there in the middle top is one of the houses, and then we also have the house next door. So they are T Onan and T Derwin, nice Welsh names. And you can see that they are set in a really nice area. They are on the hospital grounds. They are a 10-minute walk, but far enough away from the hospital that parents can hopefully relax. But as I said, only a 10-minute, well, less than a 10-minute walk, so close enough to be at hand for their babies when they need it. Set in a lovely field. The views from the houses are really lovely. So each of the houses then have 3 double rooms. Each of the bedrooms has a locked door that parents have a key to, and then the rest of the houses are shared facilities, again just to try and promote the peer support that these parents can get from each other. So shared kitchen, you can see in the bottom middle photo, we have a locked cage for the fridge so that parents are encouraged to express overnight, and they can be assured that their milk will be stored safely, and then they can bring it across to the unit then the next time they come over. I've seen lots of discussions in the chat about washing facilities. So there is a washer dryer in each of the houses that parents can use, and actually the parents that are on the unit, we do try to wash their bedding and clothes on the unit, but with 30 cots, our washing machine and dryer is constantly in use. But we encourage the parents that are staying in the houses or the bedrooms on the unit to just walk over to the houses to use the washing machines over there. And then we'll go the dining room and the living area. You can see the garden then. I haven't got photos of that, but we are hoping to spend some time in the garden now this year and get some patio furniture and some benches, just so that parents can enjoy the outdoors with the views, and then there is room for parking as well. And then just the bedrooms then. There is an upstairs and a downstairs bathroom. The bedrooms are there's single beds, but they are a trundle bed so that it can turn into a double bed. We allow siblings to stay, and we've got travel cots and high chairs to allow siblings to stay as well. In addition to that, then with all the parents, we and I'm not sure if anyone's talked about it yet today, but we use VCreate, so we send a lot of photos to our parents using the VCreate app, and that always evaluates really, really well. And just sticking with the parent support, we run a Dinky Dragons, so we've got a closed parent support group on Facebook, and also then once our babies are discharged, there is a monthly support group, almost like a mother and toddler or a parent and toddler session now, so that and that's really well attended, and parents always speak highly of it and the support that they can get from each other. So that is our facilities at the Grange. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Claire, for sharing more about those amazing facilities. I think it's been hugely insightful for all of us to hear a bit more about that. Maya asked me just to do a little summary after hearing from our lovely guest speakers before we move on to a bit of Q&A, because I can see that there are some questions coming through, so we'll try and make sure that we address all of those. But I just wanted to take the opportunity to really thank Tan and Kelly, Emily, Claire for their time. So I think I've definitely learned loads and found all of that hugely insightful. So I hope everybody would agree with me. There. While I'm just chatting through kind of some of the things that I definitely want to take away from that, I wonder whether if anybody has any other particular thoughts about kind of learnings that you've taken from those presentations today, please do pop them in the chat, because it's really helpful for us to see what sort of thing you might take away from that. I think initially we've spoken about FICARE as quite a broad term, and the kind of context and where environment and accommodation sits in that. And I think it's just highlighted today how important that is, and the impact that can have on families. Actually being able to be involved, let alone be partners in their baby's care. So I think there's a lot for us to take away and think about how we can make improvements. I think kind of Tan spoke beautifully about kind of their experience, and I think there's just so many things that we could learn from parents. So I think the gratitude that she really highlighted for what they were able to be offered in terms of being able to be present and have a space in the Ronald McDonald House, although kind of with hindsight, reflecting on how much of a difference it would have made to have been on the neonatal unit, I think it's really important as a takeaway for us. Parents are often so incredibly grateful for everything that you as healthcare professionals do to support them and their babies, but it gives us an opportunity, I think, to identify where things might be able to be even better. The contradiction, I think, between us saying we really want to be supporting and advocating for FICARE and then telling parents that they have to go home, a lot of that is not necessarily out of choice, because we know that the spaces are not available all the time, but actually it does feel like a contradiction. And if we are moving towards delivering FICARE for every family and every baby, then that really needs to be addressed. I think I mentioned kind of environment more broadly, and I think that has been highlighted today. It's not just about accommodation. The environment is so crucial. I think Emily and Claire really highlighted that right at the beginning of their presentation too, that it's not a nice to have, like it's essential, that the environment is as conducive to kind of brain development for babies, but also for supporting the parents. I mean, if Lindsay wasn't actually able to stay, she was able to stay physically, but she couldn't because of how triggering she found it. That's a real challenge that definitely should be addressed. And missing those firsts, I think, is always really heartbreaking to hear, and how accommodation and being able to be present as much as possible, as much as parents and carers want to be, can really enable them to have those moments, and missing those has such a lasting impact. And we know that lots of work is being done to make sure that happens as little as possible. But I think we want to make sure that they kind of become never events, and that parents can always experience their first of their babies. And it's been a real pleasure to hear a bit more about the individual rooms that have been available at the Grange and also at Barnet. And I think we want to kind of make sure that everybody feels that while that's not going to be a reality for everybody, it's the ideal, and it's what we want to try and get to kind of really make sure that parents can stay as much as possible. There are learnings that we can take away, all of us, I think, for kind of what could be small changes even to the environment, thinking about making sure there are 2 chairs for each cot, etc., that are smaller than creating more space on a neonatal unit, more straightforward, but it can have such a huge difference. So yeah, huge thank you to our speakers for sharing all of their insights, and I hope that has been a really helpful opportunity to reflect on environment and accommodation more broadly. I'm going to hand over to my colleague Beth, who's going to just facilitate a little bit of Q&A kind of opportunity now over the next kind of 10 minutes or so, 15 minutes or so. If anybody does have questions, I think please do raise hands, pop them in the chat, and we'll try and make sure we cover as many as possible. But I'll hand over to Beth for now.
Thanks, Chelsea. I think if Claire and Tan, if you want to turn your cameras back on, and I'm sure some of the questions might not be relevant to everyone, but we'll try and kind of get everyone discussing answers to them. So anyone that's listening, if you want to put your questions in the chat or put your hands up, I'm very happy for you to kind of ask your own questions out loud. But I thought we could just start off with one that I've seen come up in the chat a bit over the last minute or so, which is around how Barnet and the Grange got funding for their accommodation, but also for the maintenance, which I think is a really interesting issue. We hear from parents quite a lot that if you've got accommodation, that sometimes it's not as fit for purpose if it's quite old. So for both of you, if you don't mind talking just a little bit about that. I think if Kelly's still around, maybe after we've discussed that, you could talk about your funding model briefly, because I think I know a bit about it, but it might be good to talk about that as well. Who wants to go first?
I don't mind.
Oh. I don't mind, whatever. We've both got the same name. So.
I know.
Oh, yeah.
Claire Payne, I think you've maybe answered it in the chat, so if you want to talk first about yours and then we can move on to Barnet.
Yeah, of course. So we were lucky that our health board funded the houses, and they also fund the upkeep and actually things that we hadn't really thought about, like television licenses and sorting out the council tax, all those sort of things, is all done via the health board. So all of the houses are furnished from the health board funds, and we agreed then that as things needed replacing, we would take over that. In terms of upkeep, we very much rely on the parents because we do not have a team to do that. So there is you know, a dustpan and brush, a hoover and everything in the houses, although our facilities team will go over. So on discharge, we ask parents to bring their linen packs, you know, their bedding and towels and everything. We ask them, tea towels, we ask them to bring their linen pack back to the unit so that we can wash and get it ready for the next set of parents, and then facilities will go over then to clean, and while they're over there then they will clean the whole house, but in the meantime we do rely on parents because, as I said, we don't have a team to be able to do that. But we have healthcare support workers, probably like all neonatal units, that help support the unit with stocking up and cleaning of the incubators and the cots. So once a week they walk over to the unit just to check that nothing needs replacing or anything like that. So that's how we do it.
Thanks, Claire. Claire and Emily, do you want to go next?
Thank you. Yeah, so we basically seized on an opportunity because we were closing 10 cots on our Caboose site that was about 10 miles away from our unit, and then moving them to this site. So it was part of that reconfiguration process. We were able to make it kind of cost neutral to actually put in the rooms rather than having big bays. In terms of making the rooms nice and family friendly, we rely very much on our charity, who will fund additional bits that we need. We're quite lucky we do have a charity that is well contributed to within this trust, so that works. In terms of going forward, we would like to have bigger, better rooms, better facilities, but our actual neonatal unit is actually quite small for the activity we have. So we have a very good case for expanding the whole unit. And the new national standards actually recommend individual rooms. So we would be automatically putting a case forward for more individual rooms, bigger individual rooms, in terms of expanding this unit.
And I think the only other thing to say is that the individual rooms, they only work really well if the parents are there. So we're not looking at private rooms where the babies are cared for in isolation. We're looking at them as a dyad triad. And so making sure that the parents, whatever that configuration looks like, are able to stay.
Yeah, we don't actually put the babies in those rooms unless the parents can stay. So yeah.
And one last thing, the rooms aren't all singing or dancing. They you know, they're pretty. They look like they look homely, but they're pretty basic. But I don't think any family has ever said, I don't want to do it.
And of course, we let dads and other birthing partners and grandparents stay as well, depending on who is who is actually available for the baby.
Brilliant, thank you. Yeah, I was going to move on to the thing about dads and partners staying overnight. Maybe we can come back to that after. Kelly, I don't know whether you have anything to add on funding, financing of accommodation.
Yeah, sure. So we work differently with all of the hospital partners and trusts that we work with. But essentially, if a new site was identified and we were going to do a new build, for example, or there was an existing building on a hospital site that we thought was, that was right, we would do a capital appeal. So we would do the fundraising, but we would want to, and hopefully work very closely with other organisations. So a good example is the Bradford Hospitals charity. We're partnering with them to do all of the fundraising for the new build, and then in terms of in the longer term how it works. So some of the buildings that we have as our homes, we own them outright, and some of them we lease from the hospital. But what comes alongside of that is support from the hospital. So, for example, in some of our homes, the hospital provides the cleaning staff and does the cleaning and maintenance. Some of them we pay a peppercorn rent to. So it really depends on the site and the hospital and the trust, really, as to how it works. But if it's a new project, we would look for funding from our own sources, but we would really need to work with other either partner charities or the hospital trust or the hospital charity in order to get the initial funding.
Shall we move on then to the question that I think was in the chat about, I think specifically asked about male partners, but I guess any other parent not being able to stay overnight. I don't know. I think it sounds like probably that's not the case. Oh no, is that the case in Barnet? Sorry, I'll let you answer. Do you want to talk a bit about that? But also someone has also just asked about other children and parents not being able to be present if they've got other children. If you have anything to kind of add on allowing siblings, I guess, onto the unit.
So partners can stay, and if partners want to sleep there, we can. I mean, there's small rooms, but we can put 2 single beds. We can put another bed in there. Sometimes they ram into the little bed, but there's choice. And so, yeah, if you want your partner to stay, that's no problem. And then in terms of siblings, it's a really interesting one because we've had families who've had 6 other kids at home who've still spent the 6 weeks here. So it's individualized choice. Having other kids doesn't mean that you can't access the rooms. It depends on what your lifestyle is like and what resources you've got available. So we walk them through what's going to potentially it's going to look like, and then they make the informed choice whether they want to do it or not. What are your rules with parents under 18 or 16? Their parents. Oh, sorry, I read that out now. So, yeah, parents.
Claire, do you have anything else you want to add?
No, our parents have 24-hour access, day or night, regardless of whether they're mums or dads, or 2 mums or 2 dads. And obviously, if there's a single mum, then she gets a nominated support person, and they have the same access. In terms of siblings, they also have the same access, although we do encourage that they only visit after 7 o'clock for specific reasons, just to try and encourage a little bit of normality, in inverted commas, for the children. But that's not it's kind of like a soft rule rather than a hard rule, because we all know that everybody's lives are different. So
thank you. Emily and Claire, I was just wondering, sorry, I'm going to ask my own questions about so you let dad stay or put up an extra bed. Do you, how often do you get it, like mum going home for the night and dad staying with the baby? Does that happen? Do you encourage them to, if mum wants to go home? Yeah.
That happens a lot. That's happened a lot. Or if the mum's not well enough to stay. I think just in terms of describing it, it literally is part of our neonatal unit. So things can change quite a lot. If no one can stay, we can even move babies back into the main ward. And we siblings have unlimited access to the rooms, but they can't stay just because of we can't monitor them. It's not safe really for children to stay, but we certainly encourage them to come and go. And also, if you're a single parent, you can allocate another person to come and stay and be the other carer as well.
Thank you. Kelly, do you have anything you want to add on any of that? Probably more about the value that it adds from your perspective.
Well, it's really interesting because we work so closely with the hospitals that we've partnered with, and we try and do the same as what they suggest. So of course we allow grandparents, other carers, siblings, husbands, partners, to stay with us. So I think it's really similar for our homes as well.
Brilliant, thank you. So I think as we've got to 11:30, I think I'm meant to be passing back to Chelsea quickly to kind of officially close the Q&A. I think we do have half an hour though for more of an open discussion, which this feels like it probably is lending itself to anyway. But do you want to go for it, Chelsea?
Yeah, happy to. I am just going to pop up my last slide just to, so then you can access the QR code. So as Beth said, we're going to just going to close now in terms of the kind of official webinar part of today's session, and then we have got some time that we've put aside, and our speakers kindly are happy to stay to do a little bit more of this discussion. But just a huge thank you to everybody. Thanks to you for coming, for sharing your thoughts, sharing your questions. Thank you again to our speakers for their time and sharing their insights. I'd like to say a big thank you to Maya, who has done most, in fact all probably of the work to kind of get this webinar up and running. I'm just coming in as the face at the end. So definitely huge thank you to the Campaigns Policy and Research team for all of their work trying to kind of raise this issue and work to make things better. We really want to work with you, so please continue having this conversation today, but also keep in touch with us and let us know kind of your challenges, what we might be able to do to support you, to really kind of improve how we can support kind of parents and carers on the neonatal unit with the environment, with the accommodation. We would love some feedback from you. The QR code on the screen and the link to that is here as well. But we will also send across an email to you all with the link for this and also the recording of today's session. Please do complete it. It really means a lot to us to hear from you about what you have enjoyed about the session, but also what we can do better. So please do share those thoughts. And at the end of that form, you can also pop in your email address and we will make sure that we send you a certificate for attending today's session. We do lots of we have been doing lots of webinars, and we have one more next week, which is a continuation of our multidisciplinary team spotlight sessions. Please do join us for that. All of our webinars are free and then available on our website. So if you aren't able to attend, please do have a look at our website and catch up with those. We're entirely doing them for you, and we think kind of lots of the topics have been kind of hugely helpful, particularly thinking about fire care delivery. So please do take a look at those or come along to next week's session. And I think that is it from us.